Hello and welcome for the Swine Disease Reporting System Report 98 from with finds of March of 2025. My name is Giovanni Trevisan with the SDRS.
Hello, Daniel Linhares also with the SDRS team.
Hello, Willa at the SDRS team.
And today we have the pleasure to have Dr. Deb Murray with us on the SDRS podcast. And Dr. Murray is the lead veterinarian and director of veterinary services at New Fashion Pork, where she has been key part of the team since 2007. She oversees health programs for an integrated system of nearly 60,000 sows and markets about 1.5 million pigs each year, giving her deep hands-on experience in managing health challenges across a wide range of production systems and sites. Dr. Murray earned her DVM degree from the University of Minnesota, and her contributions to the swine industry has been recognized by the AASV Young Veterinarian of the Year Award in 2012 and the Lehman Swine Practice Award in 2016. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Murray.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation.
We're very happy to have you in the podcast, and thank you for joining us. Let's go for some updates about this month on the SDRS trends there. What do you have for us?
Thank you, Dr. Trevisan. So for this month, we want to highlight the activity of PED and Delta coronavirus. Specifically for PED, overall activity positive for March was 14%, slightly down from 15% in February. By category, we've seen that the winter market side positivity at 17%, down from 19% in February. And for the adult side farm at 16% positivity, the same level as February. Even though we observed that the small dip in March, but this month also marked as the fifth consecutive month of the high PED activity overall, continuing the upward trending of PED ever since that we observed since October 2025. For Delta coronavirus, the overall positivity increased to 6% in March, also up from 5% in February. For the winter market side, the positivity for is increased up to 10%, up from 8% in February. And the adult side farm with 4% also increased from 3% in February. Specifically for the facilities that we've seen that increased up to 22% and also increased from 17% in the February. And at the state level monitoring, we've seen that Illinois showing the activity above expected range for both PED and Delta coronavirus.
Really, lots of activity of PED and Delta going on, but the good thing is there is some signs that PEDs start to calm down. Hopefully, as we go toward the hot and warmer months of the year, that starts to calm down. Any updates for PRRS virus?
So with PRRS activity in March, stayed pretty much the same with what we observed in February. So positivity overall at 28%. Specifically for the winter market side, that we've seen that 43%, adult side farm at 24%. At state monitoring level, we've seen that Iowa, Illinois, and North Carolina showing activity above expected range. And this month, we also highlight the first detection of the variant 1A.13.49 in Nebraska and Missouri. And just to give you some more context, that this variant was first detected in our database in 2024. And since then, it's been detected in 9 states. And with the 2026 alone, already accounted for 5 states. And this variant is also one of the top 5 most frequently detected in our database in 2026 with nearly 100 cases so far.
Yeah, that's a good one to be keeping watching because besides of the L1Cs, there is also this 1A that is starting to pick up and spread there. So good job on keep track of that and provide that update for us. How about other pathogens? Do you have any additional information for us?
So for other pathogens, we've seen that the Mycoplasma, hive pneumonia, and influenza A virus show the activity in March stay pretty much the same what we observed in February. With Mycoplasma, hive pneumonia overall activity at 11% positivity, with the winter market side at 16% and the adult side farm at 7%. As for influenza A virus overall activity, we've seen that at 29 positivity percent, with the winter market site at 36% and a dosage arm at 20%.
Thank you, Will, for those updates there on the SDRS finds. Dr. Murray, thank you for joining us here and seeing about this PRRS virus challenge and everything that's going on there in the swine industry. From your perspective and work with a large production system, how have you seen the PRRS virus landscape change in recent times? And what is really the challenge that you are seeing with these new emerging variants in the field?
Well, I don't think PRRS is getting any better. So I think every year everyone says that, right? Oh, this year's worse than last year. Oh, this is terrible. But unfortunately, I think this year that's really true. So we've seen higher mortality than what we've normally seen, increased severity, very rapid spread. So something that's a little bit unusual is just the closeness of the virus. So we're seeing a lot of sequences that sequence within, 1 or 2% across a very wide geography that's happening sort of simultaneously. So it seems like the virus is very virulent and spreading very rapidly, and it easily is moving around at a probably unprecedented pace, just due to the dendrogram seeing all the similar homology, and that's not normal. In the past, we would have had lots of different sequences that would have appeared across different areas. But now it's like pretty much, 80% of the dendrogram is almost just one cut pattern, which is a L1C.5.32.
Yeah, and that field perspective is really back with what people have been reporting, different researchers on both experimental and epidemiological type projects, right? Where this variant that you just mentioned, the 1C.5.32, it is significantly more virulent, right? Based off of more severe lesions, based off more higher magnitude of viremia in experimentally infected pigs, but also from the lenses of POMP, which is another project we work with, PRRS outbreak management program. It has over 40% higher piglet losses just in the breeding herd. That's before talking about nursery and win to finish, where data from practitioners and again from different projects, different institutions have been showing much higher mortality. So it's not that, like you said, well, we every year it seems like the virus is getting better. At least this time there is evidence to support that it is actually getting not better, worse, right? More severe.
Yes.
And
Yep. We've seen that same thing even on the finishing side. Typically, as pigs come to a maturity, their immune system matures as well. So normally, if you're halfway or maybe 3/4 of the way through finishing and you get a lateral PRRS infection, yeah, you're going to notice it, but it's not terrible. And now it seems like you're getting some of these groups that can be 10, 15%, maybe higher mortality mid to finishing, which was also very unusual.
And I think this high consequence of PRRS virus that is affecting the industry and making bad year over year is leading for a lot of discussion about control, elimination strategies. And we just come out from AASV that was held a couple of days ago. And there was a lot of discussion about, hey, can you go towards elimination of PRRS? And also PED was a discussion there. But I want to pick your brain here. What is the main important directions and opportunities that we see for the swine industry as moving forwards towards control and eliminating PRRS virus?
I know it's a question that keeps coming up or a comment that comes up a lot, but I think we still need additional tools to really do that well. We can be at a beginning point where I think we understand the virus fairly well, we understand transmission fairly well, but we don't have perfect tools yet to totally reduce shedding, right? We have some tools that will maybe reduce it some, but maybe not enough. So it's still able to move around. And so maybe it will get to the point where we will need combinations of things that can influence it in multiple ways to try to do some sort of biocontainment. But right now, I think we're at a stage where that's going to be pretty difficult with the current tools that we have.
And like you said, reduction, what I hear is maybe we're not ready for total elimination yet, but we do have some combination of practices and tools and peak flow and biosecurity containment to make
Mhm.
significant efforts to reduce
Mhm.
the impact of those viruses, right? And talking about this package that you're mentioning, biosecurity, biocontainment will be good, something that we do have in hands. Can you share your experiences, thoughts on some of those biosecurity and biocontainment practices the industry should be paying more and more attention and make more and more serious efforts to implement those as the viruses continue to get more aggressive.
Yeah, I think that doing the basic things well goes a long way. So the basic clean, dirty lines and following those and, not bringing virus from the outside, from the dead box into the barn. How do we effectively do that well? Because I think there's a lot of spread that occurs from people, right? People movement and just part of their daily job. And I think
Mm-hmm.
if we have a way to do those things really well routinely, I think we can reduce a lot of spread in and of itself just that way. Now, obviously, there's going to be some aerosol spread, and that's not something we're going to be able to always control. Potentially with use of vaccine, we've seen a reduction in shedding on previously vaccinated pigs. So that will help some, but it's not going to be zero unless we have filtration on everything, right? Which I think we're a long way from ever having that. But I think if we can do some really basic things well, and I think the sow farms are good at that, where they focused on, getting in, using the bench, showering, UVing maybe food or other supplies in, having a D&D room that has a high enough temperature that you can make sure, and do an additional step of cleaning. So I think they do all that stuff well. So if we can kind of transfer some of that maybe to the nursery sites or the finisher sites, I think that would go a long way too for just reducing that kind of local spread that we probably move around just in part of normal daily chores.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned filtration. Is the industry in a point that with those new viruses that would justify economically implementing the filtration packaging in when to finish sites or nurseries yet? Or
Yeah, the wean to finish sites would be really challenging because I'm not sure how you would get around if the barns have to go into tunnel. So like just the amount of air that needs to move through those. Nurseries, on the other hand, would be a possibility. So those would be something that would be feasible to filter. I have heard of some that are considering it or maybe have done it already. So
Mhm.
that definitely would be possible. But I'm not sure on the wean to finish that really would be, just with the amount of air that we need to move, unless there's some completely different way of doing that. But yeah, I think the other challenge is with the amount of virus that is coming out now. So with the virulence of the strains and shedding more and higher viral loads, I think we also need to really look hard at the type of filters. So like what was filtering and working well maybe 5 or 10 years ago, maybe is not enough now. So
Mhm.
if you were at a MERV 16, maybe you even need to consider a HEPA filter, which is a big step. But if we're not able to filter out enough, that would be the next step. Or a 14 to a 16, or whatever that may be, or what the setup of the site is. But I don't think that with the amount of virus there is, that our older ways of doing it maybe are going to always be enough now.
Yeah, I like it when you say, well, it requires a package, right? It's not just one thing that I'm gonna do and then I'm ready, right? It's that package.
When talking about PRRS, any new insights in terms of how PRRS behave in the population, sharing or things that come from AASV, Dr. Murray?
Yeah, so I found a very interesting presentation at ASV that discussed the length of shedding. And so
Mm,
it's sort of what we would have maybe thought of already, but nobody had really done the due diligence to document it well. And it was in regards to inoculation. So the younger the animal is, essentially, the longer that they will shed. So that's pretty important information because, as we all know, a lot of the purge closures now, we basically have a birthday, right? We're sort of expecting this to last a year, which in the past we would have said, oh, maybe 240 or 270 days, but that keeps getting longer. Well, and
Mm-hmm.
for us to weather that whole closure, we need gilts. Well, so then it's like, okay, well, we know we need to go really, really young on these gilts and go all the way down to maybe wean age, right? To have enough gilts to weather this lengthy closure. Well, unfortunately, those really young gilts that we brought in and we inoculated when they were really young shed for a lot longer than our older gilts. So it might be something we need to weigh the pros and cons of, and possibly if we can load up more, mid maturity to mature gilts and maybe not have the younger ones, because the younger ones might be a contributing factor to that longer closure. So we sort of tried to like help ourselves out, but sort of shot ourselves in the foot at the same time by bringing in these really young gilts that have this super long shedding period. So just sort of something that we maybe need to look at again.
Yeah, that's a very important information, very practical and applicable for the planning of herd closures there. Thanks for sharing that.
Anyway, if you don't bring those uh win age guilds, right? You just a mid maturity one. How can you still close the herd for a long time without those new ones, or do you bring the new ones but you actually just do some extra immunization on those? So how would you?
Yeah, so it could be a couple strategies. So you could choose to bring the younger ones, but then just more heavily test. And so if you
Uh-huh.
know there's some outliers that keep shedding, like maybe those need to be
Yeah.
removed potentially, if we have a way to really do that well. Otherwise, if you don't bring the youngest ones, you bring more of the middle age ones. You just have to make absolutely certain to breed your gilts and skip your sows, right? Because we want them once they start cycling, we don't want to wait too long and have them get stale and then be not unable to breed them. So we just have to make sure that we're really focused on that, maybe skip heating some sows and then making
Mm-hmm.
sure we're getting those gilts bred. So then that way we can get those entered into the herd and use those. So probably maybe a little bit of both, maybe a little bit less younger animals, maybe a little bit more older animals, and then maybe some more intensive testing, but potentially on the younger animals, if that's our concern.
And talk with the farm manager, like you said, to make sure that you really map those
Mhm.
breeding plans to incorporate the guilds and don't let them mature too much, or don't want
Right,
to also breed them too young.
right. Retain as many as you can.
Mm-hmm. All right, no, that's great. But PRRS continues to be the leading cause of survivability and challenges here, keeping those pigs alive right to the end. But also PED. PED has been pretty active. So what have you seen? What are some of the highlights on the PED side?
Yeah, PD has definitely had a resurgence. It seems like there's more activity now, more breaks in sites that normally never see it. So being sow farms or even like high health, sort of biosecure or secluded areas. So PD definitely is on the rise right now. Again, that was another interesting take home from AASV. There was some presentations talking about just the strain has changed and some cross protection that we would have historically had. Now the newer strains of PED, it's not necessarily cross protecting again. So maybe if
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
had PED in and they got loose again later, 3 or 4 months later, and then you test them and it's like, oh, it's just PED. Well, it might be another strain of PED. So maybe that could sort of explain a little bit of that more recent uptick.
So one of the take homes for people out there, meaning we should for your PD, don't stop with your typical PCR, right? You may want to sequence and do some investigations with these new emerging, say, variants or however we should call them. Hmm.
Yep, yep. And I don't know that there's any testing difference today. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but with the normal PCR testing, we would find it, but we wouldn't necessarily know if it's the
Right.
newer, strain or if it's the original, versus, before we actually were able to kind of sort that out a little bit with the indel or variant strain, but not necessarily this new one.
Hmm.
Mhm.
In Mycoplasma too, there was a lot of still seems like we're still living a great momentum of in this industry, right? The US swine industry on Mycoplasma efforts to control and eliminate Mycoplasma. And
Yeah.
so what have your experiences been on that end?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a big push to eliminate mycoplasma. And so probably driven by PRRS mainly, because if a herd is already mycopositive and they get PRRS, that's that much worse. So anything that you had under control, PRRS is going to make that out of control. So they take a stable herd and make it very unstable. So I think it's the lesson of controlling all the things that we can. So if we can control circle on the sow farm, if we can eliminate Myco on the sow farm, you break with PRRS, and hopefully you only have PRRS to deal with and not three other things. So I think there's been a big push at that, and I think there's been a lot of successes. Of course, there's always going to be some stumbling, and I know there's been some good work that's been done that has shown maybe the historical information that we had on Myco in terms of the length of shedding. Of course, like the more animals you test, you find outliers. So it's like, wait a minute, we thought that the shedding only lasted 180 days or 270 days or whatever that number is. And now it's like, wow, I'm still finding animals that are positive. So again, kind of some extra tools that we've gained while learning along the way of elimination, that we maybe need to do some testing even towards the end and make sure that we're ready to open the door, because what's one more month? If I've already gotten this far, what's one more month, and make sure it works?
Right.
So I think there's definitely a lot of that happening, which is leading to, I think, more successes.
And like you said, without Mycoplasma, the PRRS, you can reduce further your impact, right, on mortality, average daily gain, antimicrobial use, and all that. Those dual infections gonna come and potentiate.
Yep. And we notice that it's very obvious on the downstream pigs, even not talking about a sow farm PRRS break, but on a grow finish where you get a lateral infection. And if that herd is a myco-negative herd, it's much more manageable than in a myco-positive, even stable. So their morbidity is so much lower, the mortality is better. Pigs just recover quickly from the same exact virus and the same genetics, right? But that's the difference, is those secondaries that they have to deal with.
And the Myco is another one that, like I said, there is no silver bullet, but there are enough tools to be put together in that package, right? And either, like I said, eliminate or at least reduce, bring it to stable. You can economically silence the clinical consequences.
Yep. The payback is relatively short. Yes, it is a lot, but once you get through that, like it's definitely well worth it.
Sounds good. Well, that's all about. Thank you. That's all about what we had for this for this podcast here, and thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.